welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, V.
And Sean, I have a low voice for this podcast, for this episode. We interview people in creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on our social medias if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
Today we have with us Ucheomaaa. Welcome, bears. What's up, dude? Welcome on.
Not much. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is daunting, but really exciting. I was surprised by the invite, so this is gonna be cool.
I'm so excited that you were down to come on the pod. I've followed you for a long time on Instagram, I think like a couple years, and I found you through your reels. Actually, your reels are so fun.
That's very high praise. Thank you. I'm surprised the reels thing actually was the reason, because like I think with the shift to reels being the big thing, especially on Instagram, it was kind of scary, like going from doing mostly comics to doing animation just to kind of, keep up with the evolution of content on there. It was kind of a big task. So I'm glad that's what hooked you a bit,
Yeah, because it's kind of crazy, because at first I was like, oh, well, that's a new internet animator that I'm really excited to find out about. And then I was like, wait, you do comics? I was like, you do animation and comics? And I was like, what's that all about? And and you have like this whole like super long webcomic that you've been posting on Webtoons for like, how long now, would you say?
Wow, it started posting in I would say early 2022, but I've been working on it since like 2021. So it's been posting for about a little over a year. We're on hiatus now, but there's about like 120 episodes in season 1. And I'm currently working on season 2.
Oh, I like that you call it seasons. That makes it sound so official. I like it.
Yeah, they do that. It's interesting because Webtoon, like that was the big thing that shocked me, is like they break their chapters into episodes. Like they don't call it chapters. They say, oh, this is episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and then you get a season. So it makes you feel like you really are making like, your little cartoon. It feels more official that way, I guess,
That's cool.
Is it for some reason I thought you were doing a Webtoon canvas, but is it a Webtoon original?
It is a Webtoon original. Vibecheck started. Yeah, it's super dope.
That's so cool, dude.
Hell yeah.
It's shocking. I really did not know that was like a job for a very long time. And I did originally start posting on Canvas. That was kind of the the intro into it, because I was working almost exclusively on Instagram, and then I had a couple friends who were telling me, hey, you should get on Webtoon, you should publish your thing on Webtoon. And so I just started formatting them and then posting them on there. And that's kind of when it caught the eye of an editor there, and they said, hey, would you want to make this into a Webtoon original? And I was like, that would be super sick. So I definitely leapt at the chance to do that. It was really, really serendipitous how that worked out.
That is so awesome.
Everyone's probably gonna know what it is already, but if you want to, how do people find your Webtoon?
Yes, so my Webtoon is called Vibecheck. It is a comedy. Man, what to say? What to say about it? It's basically just a wacky buddy slice of life fantasy comic type thing that's just, I don't know, just things that I find funny and things that I find, interesting, and just like a little story about finding oneself and finding your path and all that. And it's a Webtoon original, and that's super dope.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I was wondering, you probably get this question a lot, but I was wondering how much of it is autobio, because of the slice of life quality of it.
Okay. It's because it's so zany. So
Yeah.
very little of it is like directly word for word. Like reading it, you're going to be like, okay, this definitely did not happen. But
Yes.
a lot of it is inspired by real events, or just like lessons, or just like, funny things that I've experienced in my life. And it really came about in an interesting way that allowed me to kind of explore topics like that through the comic. Because it definitely started on Instagram as a very like basic like slice of life comic strip you know, and a lot of the comic artists have that, especially on like Instagram, where you'll have comics about yourself and it'll just be like day-to-day things that are funny or like, you know,
Mhm.
situations that happen. And Vibe Check kind of sprouted out of that. But then once I moved it to Webtoon, it became something where I really wanted to add a story around it. And so it ended up being this weird, like semi-autobiographical piece of fiction, which is a really interesting thing to play around with because you know having a main character be yourself,
Mhm.
there are like a lot of a lot of tricky traps that you can fall into as like you know the writer, you know, trying to make it authentic but also trying not to fall into the self-insert thing because that's a very easy trap to fall
Yes.
into,
That is so
you know.
true. Yeah, 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 yeah. What would you say? So you talked about there's like a bunch of traps from the top of
Mhm.
your head. What would these traps be for you?
Okay, for certain there are definitely elements where when you're doing a self-insert it is very tempting to downplay your faults and to
Mm.
play up your quirky funny traits, you know,
Hmm.
even your flaws.
Look how cool and hot and I am.
Yes.
Right, exactly. It's like look how interesting I am. Even like the flaws that a lot of people will add to their self-inserts tend to be a little bit
It like turns into a
like they're
brag when people do it sometimes.
yeah, it's like I'm like, you know, there's the basic ones like I'm super awkward and I'm
Hmm.
like, you know, I don't really know how to talk to people and like, you know, I'm kind of an introvert. And it's like, well, yeah, we're, you know, as artists, that's something that is very relatable. But then it's harder to kind of go into things like, you know, a crippling fear of failure or like, you
Hmm.
know, being someone who pushes people away out of fear of like alienating people naturally, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And those are traits that I think are way more interesting to portray in a character, especially a self-insert. And
Mm.
it's really easy to get a little skittish about that. You know, it's a very vulnerable thing trying to write your own flaws into a character while maintaining like the authenticity of it and not like embellishing or making yourself look better than you are, you know. And that's a tricky thing. It's a tightrope act. But I think like just straight up being honest and like making you know the comedic spin of it, you know, real, it kind of becomes more relatable through the fact that it's not a sanitized version of your personality, you know.
That's so true. And I think that's like what you're describing really shows through in your comics because as I was reading them, I was like, I wonder how you balance that because your character who's sort of you or inspired by you is both like we can root for him and he's also flawed like in a way that is very endearing but not like you said not too like expected I guess like so that's really interesting.
It's really it's a fun kind of puzzle to put together where it's like how do I portray a character who is me but like not quite me and like is learning the lessons that I've learned through my life
Mm.
but like approaching it in a very real way where it's like no, it takes a lot of time for you to really get with the program. It takes time for you to really accept things that maybe in real life you have accepted, you know, but like the
Mm-hmm.
character has to learn it again. And so you have to
Yes.
kind of confront like how did I react to that the first time, you know, how did I deal with like interpersonal conflict or grief or like you know things that I'm kind of embarrassed about my reaction to, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think kind of parsing that becomes tricky, but it's also really rewarding when you like put it out there authentically and people respond to it in a positive way, you know?
Yeah, that's so true. And it's fun too because like you have a style. I was just talking about that before we started recording, but like you have a style that is kind of like this amazing, perfectly well, I'm trying to find the word like it's like it's the right amount of like anime cartoons, like old school cartoons, internet memes. And you know, it's just it feels very modern and fresh. And also your drawings are very appealing. And so I guess I was the question that follows that is like kind of like how did you kind of come up with your style? What are your inspirations?
Oh man, I think that I was so happy when you were describing how you perceived like the inspirations in my work because that was kind of spot on, you know. Like I loved anime growing up, but I also loved cartoons a lot, like, you know, Western cartoons and stuff like that. And so a lot of my inspiration comes from, you know, both of those worlds. You know, like there was an element of like early Dragon Ball, for example, that inspired me a lot. And that was kind of my gateway into anime. But then at the same time, you know, the Western cartoons that were just on TV at the time also really inspired me. And so like I couldn't choose. Like as a kid, I was all over the place in terms of like my art style. And I never really like that's never really changed where it's like I really want to know how to do all of the things that I like. When I see something, I'm like, I want to know how they did that. I want to understand why I like that, what's appealing about that to me. And so like my art style would shift. If I lined up my notebooks, I could point at it and tell you what show I was really into at that time, because it shows in the way that I drew my characters or the way that I just expressed my art. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that, where it's like you go through a phase where you're drawing a lot of characters that look a very specific way and you're like, oh man, I was just really into like Danny Phantom at that time, or like I was really into like Teen Titans or Ben 10 or whatever. And because all of those things, you know, there was a period where a lot of those things were inspired in turn by anime. You know, anime is kind of like influence into the West. And so like the way those things blended, it was just kind of like the perfect hybrid of things I was already into. And so just like kind of combining those elements became something that really inspired me a lot. So I really try to capture that in what I do, and, you know, just kind of doing what feels natural, but also is stuff that I would want to watch, you know, like the cartoons and anime that I think look cool. Those definitely all influence the way that I draw now, for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's cool because I think you have this way also, and it's not just in your drawing style, it's also in the way that you pace your stories and the way you do your jokes. Okay, I wanted to ask you if you read GTO, Great Teacher Onizuka, or if you've watched the anime.
I haven't. Is it good? I actually haven't heard of that one.
It's kind of dated now. I don't know if people listening, if you're listening to this episode right now, let us know in the comments what you think of this anime or manga, because I loved it as a teen, but it's got some like kind of like old school like gender stuff in there, so just be warned about it. But the way you kind of cut to the faces and you do like this like really like dumpy face sometimes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Those are some of my favorite things to do. And like that, it comes out of several things, you know, like there was an era of cartoons that really like pioneered some of that stuff. Like Ren and Stimpy did it a lot. SpongeBob did it a lot. SpongeBob is the one that I more grew up with. Ren and Stimpy was just like a little bit before my time. But like SpongeBob did it a lot. Flapjack did a lot. Chowder did it sometimes as well, where it's like they call it gross ups.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's a close up and it's just like somebody's reaction to something, or it's just like a really like grotesque, like realistic drawing. And those were always the funniest parts, because to me a lot of comedy comes out of people's reactions to what's being said, what, you know, somebody reacting to another character. And I think that's a big staple of comedy that I enjoy, where it's like you can have two characters who are completely not funny people, but the way they interact with each other can be funny just based off how they react to each other. And so much of that is in the facial expression that it's like even an implied facial expression can be hilarious. You know what I mean? Like one of my favorite comics is it's so dumb. It's this like stick figure comic, and this one stick figure runs into frame, right? And he's like, hey, check out how hard I can pee. And he just like it's just like this panel of him just flooding the panel with just like he's just peeing like and the other character is just standing there, and then the last panel is just a close-up of his face, and there's no face on his face. It's just a circle, but it's like the implied like face is enough to be a hilarious punchline, because you know that his reaction is just like, how do you react to that? You know, like the absence of an expression is funny. So it's like there is so much power in like just a face. And so when it comes to comedy, so much of what I like is portraying the humor in something just by somebody reacting to something absolutely outlandish or ridiculous, you know?
Oh yeah. I think that one of my favorite things recently are it's like glow ups where it's not like a gross frame. It's like how beautiful or how cute or how pouty or whatever, how sparkly they look. Just like an opportunity to like all of a sudden you break the style almost and you like go in on a frame. And yeah, I like those a lot.
Those are so great. Like, and that's the thing. It's like it doesn't have to be used to gross people out. Like the fact that you can like kind of flex, using just something that's actually just really visually appealing. You know what I mean? I like breaking style is to me is really important. It's like it emphasizes things in a way that you won't get if you just keep things the same. And that's something that I think anime artists figured out before like Western cartoonists, I think, which is that
I agree, yeah, because in the panels,
anime
like
break style all the time.
yes, well, in older anime, I guess, because I feel like I don't know if you've kind of you still read manga or still watch anime, but I feel like the newer anime doesn't do it as much. It's a little bit more serious.
Yeah, that's true. I'd agree.
Back when it was like kind of like really like kind of like silly, kind of like the more like Naruto or like
Shin-chan or
Bleach.
something.
Yeah, but even like your shonen typical anime that was like mostly adventure but had comedy baked in it as well, because early Naruto has these like really like silly moments as well where they kind of like break the style and or like Dragon Ball. Early Dragon Ball does it a lot too.
Yeah, it's I think it's a beautiful thing. Like I just think that because anime at its core, like if you look at characters in anime, they do adhere to like a lot of actual proper proportions. Like they'll have their big eyes or whatever, and their like tiny nose and their tiny mouth or whatever. But then it's like if you look at their bodies, they're drawn very like proportional to like actual human bodies and everything. And so when they break style, it's a lot more apparent because it's this huge juxtaposition where you'll have a character and then suddenly you draw them like they'll be 2 feet tall with a giant head and their face will be drawn completely differently and all of this stuff. Whereas with American cartoons or like Western cartoons, at least when I was growing up, there was like a style that was a little bit less realistic and a little bit more, goofy and exaggerated, but then they wouldn't really push that too far. It's like you would stay consistent with that style for the most part, even throughout all the comedic bits and everything. And so I think blending those two things is really interesting, like having something that is wacky, but then it could be wackier. You know what I mean? You could make it crazier, or sometimes it's like doing the inverse where it's like, oh, well, this is super goofy, but I'm going to like flip the script a bit by making this character look super proportional and like realistic, or like making them look on model, which in and of itself is an interesting like twist on the style.
Yeah, and you kind of do that with your two characters too, because you have Uche and you have Vibe Fairy. it's so funny to me that like it's so funny to me that you have this concept which is kind of like a fairy god. I thought it's so smart too that you called him Vibe Fairy, because it is literally a fairy godmother type of character. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that like the way he came about was so funny, and I love just talking about the Vibe Fairy as a character because he's one of those characters where he is just the perfect example of committing to the bit where it's like it started as an inside joke with one of my friends. Just the concept of that kind of dude existing was just like a joke we made up, where it's like, okay, we're talking about just conflict and dealing with people, and my friend was like, oh yeah, like I'm like there's this person I'm having like issues with, and it's like I can't get a straight answer out of him. Like he won't just talk to me about the issue. It's like we're talking about it and he's only talking in terms of like vibes and energy and like manifesting. It's like he won't be like, hey, you're upsetting me. He's like, your vibes are off. You're throwing my vibes out of whack. You know what I mean? It's like I can't get I can't manifest the proper energy in the situation. It's like how do we communicate? It's like we're speaking a different language. And so I just love the concept of somebody seeing the world in terms of like purely just energy and the spiritual and all of that stuff, and then juxtaposing that with somebody who's just like having a really shit day and just like it's just like I'm having a really bad day I just don't want to interact with anybody. And someone's just like, hey man, your vibes are off. You know, that's the problem.
It's like some toxic
get your vibes
positivity
right.
shit.
Yeah.
Like they're coming in like, hey, you're never gonna turn it around with an attitude like that. You gotta like, everything is good, dude. And he's like, no, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he's like, dude, my grandma died. He's like, have you tried meditating? Like it'll fix everything. And it's like it's I think as I was writing the character, because it was so funny, the more I wrote the character, the more endearing it became. Where I was like, no, like this guy means well. You know what I mean? Like at his core, he is trying to help. And that evolved to like, he's trying to help, but he doesn't really have the language to like communicate it. And like there's just like almost a language barrier in there where it's like somebody is just seeing the world purely literally and somebody else is seeing it like in the metaphysical, and it's like how do these two interact and how does one try to help the other? But then like the element of what if he's right? Like that was the most interesting. That's when it kind of clicked for me. That's when all the comedy started to make sense, was when I was like, what if he's actually right? You know what I mean? And like this kind of literal reading of the world is really elementary, and you really do need to check your vibes. You know what I mean? And so that's how I started kind of approaching the dynamic, and it became way more fun after that, because I realized that's just so good. Like having one character be like the relatable character, but he's the wrong one. Like the one who's the outlandish weirdo actually has the answers. And I was like, that's kind of real in a way. You know what I mean? There's so many people I've met where I'm like, this guy's a lunatic. But you realize, oh no, he's got a point.
But it sucks to hear the answers sometimes.
Yeah, it does, dude. It does, and like that was like, yeah, we don't like, look, I'm comfortable in my ignorance. Sometimes you do just want to like return to the ooze. You know what I mean? I don't want to be intellectual anymore. I don't want to be a higher functioning being. I want to return to plasma or whatever. And so somebody telling you, hey, here's a solution to your problem, and it requires you to work on yourself. Like, I don't want to hear all that. You know what I mean? Like
everyone else in the world change around me to accommodate
exactly. I'm the main character, and I'm also the victim, and nothing's my fault. And I, woe is me, all of that. Just let me wallow. And then somebody being like, hey, some of your problems are your fault. And you're just like, hey, none of that.
Hey, dude, your vibes are looking kind of red. I heard about this cool chocolate recipe where if you mix blue vibes with your red vibes, it turns into purple, which is pretty chill and something that you enjoy right now.
But, I'll stick to Bang energy. Thank you very much. And staying up till 4 a.m. That'll help me out. So, you can take your advice elsewhere.
I only drink more off-brand energy drinks that you'd come across at a gas station. I only drink Venom. I only drink Venom energy. I only drink Poison energy. Poison energy.
That's real. Honestly, with some of the energy drinks I was drinking back in the day, I don't know how I made it where I am. That was truly self-destructive behavior. Look, I was convinced divine inspiration strikes at 3 a.m. So you gotta stock up on energy drinks so you can stay up and actually create the best stuff. Little did I know, it would just make me delirious, which worked for comedy in some aspects, but for general health, absolutely.
She used to make my give me the spins. I used to stay up all night, and it used to make me the world spin. It's just like some. I like thinking of made up energy drink slogans like fight fire with fire. It's being tired's bad, so do something worse at it.
Heck yeah. Not only is it bad for you, but they give you the worst imaginable advice. That's even better.
Sometimes the only cure for poison is more poison.
Oh God.
You're talking about drinking these energy drinks and bad diet. In your comic, you have this joke about just only surviving of cereals and milk. Is that based on experience or?
Look, so you remember when I was talking about things that aren't very flattering about yourself that you have to talk about sometimes? I think this was one of them where it's sometimes choosing healthy food options is hard. All right. And that one wasn't a serious one, but yeah, it happens. We all reach that point where we're subsisting off something that we really should not be surviving off of. And you're in the trenches and you're trying to survive, and you're like, I have way more, issues to worry about than my diet, so I'm just gonna live off, ramen noodles or
Yeah.
cereal or like packs of Oreos or whatever. And so yeah, look, all of that stuff, that is a little real. You know what I mean? Like there was a point where
I love
I was like, that was a really long way of saying, yeah, that was a little.
And listen, did I run out of milk and use Bang Energy as milk? Yes, absolutely.
Haven't we all? Is what I'm saying. We've all been there. We've all done that. Like that's a rite of passage, You
I agree, especially when you're especially when you're a working artist, and there's sometimes you're like, you know what, this is what my budget will allow me to have this month, I guess.
It happens. You spend too much time alone. You're talking to yourself. You're making decisions where you're like, oh gosh, the element of social pressure has left, and I'm sitting here, and I'm eating like Oreo O's with Bang Energy as the milk, and I'm just just self-destructing. It's no good, right? Obviously, but it's like it's something that it's good to acknowledge. You're not alone. If you're out there and you're just subsisting off cookies, we've been there. It's happened.
Yeah.
We've done it and we've survived. We've grown.
Sometimes the feeling of Captain Crunch cutting the roof of your mouth is the only thing that makes you feel alive right then.
Oh man, that's so real. True words were never spoken. I think that
Sometimes I let it go down the windpipe wrong on purpose, just because it wakes me. I know it's gonna wake me up, and I won't need to have my Bang Energy. You know what I mean? Like I know that I'm going, oh, and then I'll be like, okay, I'm awake now. You know what I mean?
Man, that's hardcore. That's like
that is not. It's also not true.
Scooter.
But
yeah, this guy lets the razor scooter hit him on the ankles on purpose. He's committed.
Dude, my shins are like one flick away from timbering,
just turning to dust. So real. That's so real.
This is kind of like a big left field from the current conversation. I was wondering, did you study art, or did you just kind of like always do it on the side? Like what was it like for you? Because you're like a professional artist now. You like make a living from the webcomic and like doing freelance. So kind of what was that path like a little bit?
Yeah, it's still crazy thinking of myself as a professional artist at this point. But yeah, like I did not study art. I actually I love drawing, since I was a little kid, and I would always just be doodling everywhere. I'd always be, scribbling in notebooks. I'd get in trouble in school because I would always be drawing on homework and on the back of quizzes and all over the place. And like I get notes sent home to my parents, like he wasn't paying attention. He was drawing in class again. We caught him doodling. My parents would be like, hey, this is a distraction. You need to cut it out. And they meant well. It's like when you're a kid and your main job is just school, especially when your parents are immigrants. And like they worked really hard to get you where you are, and you're just there just drawing nonsense in class. Yeah, they're going to be a little upset. But I was never really deterred by that. It was like I really loved doing it, and I just constantly kept it up. And of course there were periods of time where I kind of fell off of it. I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to do this professionally, so I guess it's like I'll do it whenever I feel inspired. But there were like stretches in like middle school and like, where I wasn't really drawing like that. And then in high school, I just really like 8th grade going into high school, I just really like got obsessed with it again and just started drawing all the time. And then the idea of going to art school was never really on my radar until one day someone came into our art class, and this was in like high school, and they were talking about this art school that they're going to, and they were telling us like, yeah, you can go to an art school and you can actually learn to be a professional artist, and you can do all of these things. And I was like, oh man, is this what it feels like to be excited about the future? You know what I mean? Like is this what it's like to want to do something as a career, And so I was really pumped about that. And so like that became like a goal of mine. And ultimately that didn't end up working out on account of the fact that, my family was very much in the camp of, hey, it's a very competitive field. It's going to be very difficult to make a living, and you want to be able to like, support yourself and all of that stuff. And so they weren't necessarily on board with that. And so those dreams were kind of dashed a bit. And, you know, going into college, what ended up happening was I actually studied psychology. So like
Oh
yeah, it
yeah.
was yeah, I actually, you know, I tell people about that and they're like, "Oh man, I guess you did that just for your folks, huh?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I actually really like psychology. Like it was really
Mhm.
interesting to me and still is to this day,
Honestly, that
but it
makes
was
so
never
much
really like my
sense
main
with your
yeah.
with your writing. No, because I feel like your writing is really insightful, and I feel like it's kind of uncommon in webcomics, so that makes a lot of sense. That's so crazy. That's so cool.
Do they use vibes a
I
lot in in
Oh yeah,
psychology?
you'd be surprised. That is official
DSM.
psychological terminology. Yeah, the DSM-5 lists vibes as a very important part of your, your your physio psychological whatever the hell.
Profiler. Yeah,
They're like, yeah, I remember stuff. I remember stuff from school. But yeah, it was like it was a very interesting experience where it was like, yeah, I'm studying this one thing that I'm pretty interested in, you know, for the most part, but I know for a fact it's not what I really want to be doing. And that
Mm,
was a weird juxtaposition for me. But then at the same time, it was like, you know, in the back of my head, I was like, I know that I really want to be doing, you know, art in whatever way that happens, you know, whatever that's going to be. And so, like, it was just something I did on the side. So by this point, like by college, I'd kind of already had an Instagram page, and it was mostly just for keeping my drawings because I lost stuff a lot. And so, because I
mm.
lost a lot of physical copies of things, one of my
Mhm.
friends suggested that I get an Instagram so I can at least have them like digitally saved somewhere, which is a great idea. And so I started that, and so like in my free time I would just post things on there, you know, as a means of just like keeping up with my art, you know. And when you have a place to post your art, it kind of, you know, kicks you into gear. You have a reason to make things because you can share it with people. And so I think once I got to college, that's when I started really getting into comics again, where it was like I have so many interesting things happening and like so many funny inside jokes with friends. And I, you know, I just wanted to like entertain my pals, you know, like that's what you
Mhm.
do. And so I just make stupid stuff that was like relatable to them and I'd post it. And then I was surprised at how many people that I didn't know were seeing it and like really resonating with it. And they were just like, dude, you got to keep posting this stuff. And that's when I kind of started getting more into posting regularly. And that really, I think that was just like a turning point where I was like, even though it's not what I'm studying right now,
Mhm.
it is still something that very much matters to me. It's something that I love doing that like brings me joy. And so I was like, look, if I can't study it right now, I'm just gonna keep practicing and getting better. And you know, I was fortunate enough to have friends who constantly hyped me up and were constantly like encouraging me to do more art. And my college friends were like the ones who got me my first digital drawing tablet. Like they were like, hey,
Oh, that's
you know,
That's
we
so
want you to
sweet. Oh, I love
it's
this.
insanely sweet. I bring it up to them all the time. I'm like, that really like changed things for me. Like the idea that, you know, you guys cared enough about me continuing to do my work that
Mhm.
you know, got me into digital art essentially. And they really rallied around me and they were like, hey, you know, we want you to do this. We want you to see this through. We want you to like, you know, make things that you like and like have more fun doing it and learn new things. And I'm like forever grateful for that because that really, you know, encouraged me to keep doing it and to do it more seriously. And that's kind of when I started seeing a growth in my, you know, like what I was doing. I started committing a little harder to like what I was making, and I tried a little harder to like make things look a little bit more professional, and I had mixed results in that, but like I was making stuff, you know, and so I felt even though like I wasn't in that professional field, I was still, you know, practicing and getting better and like, you know, learning new things and evolving. And, you know, that just kind of ended up working out, you know, and there were like a lot of weird obstacles in the way, you know, but getting there was worth it because there was a lot of overcoming adversity involved, you know, the idea that you're not really supposed to do something, but you
Mhm.
just know that you really, really want to, and you know that you'd make it work if you tried. And so, like, I think just the fact that I wasn't really deterred by the fact that it wasn't my field of study really, really, really kind of helped me because I feel like it's very easy to get discouraged when you feel like there's one pipeline way to do something. Like there's
Mhm.
one way to get to where you're going. And if that's thwarted, then you're kind of like dead in the water. And that's not true at all. Like I think that if you really are committed to something and you're committed to making it work, and you really work at it, and you really like ask for help, that's a big one, then
Mm-hmm.
you can really surprise yourself with what you can accomplish through like somewhat unconventional means, you know what I mean? And like there are a lot of things that felt like, oh well, I'm kind of an imposter, I'm not like a real artist because like I'm not in art school, I'm just somebody drawing stuff in my room between assignments and stuff like that. But then it's like, well, no, if you're making things and you are actually committed to your art and you're like making stuff, there is nothing about not going to art school or not being in a professional environment that makes you less of an artist, you know what I mean? There's nothing
Yeah.
about that that takes away from what you're doing, you know? And I think that a lot of times that discouragement can be what makes people stop, you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of
Yes.
people where I would talk to them and I used to love their art, and I used to be like, dude, you're so much better than me, how do I get like you? And I'd run into them like a long time later and I'd be like, hey, you know, are you still working, are you still drawing? And they'd be like, no, I wasn't really going anywhere with it, so I stopped, you know? And that would always make me
Oh.
really sad because it's like
Mhm.
I love seeing people like do something just because they love doing it, and like the idea that, you know, it needs to immediately be making you money, it needs to immediately be industry or nothing, it needs to be, you know, this or that. No, you make what you want to make and find your lane, find your niche, find the thing that like speaks to you, and like work at it and make it work for yourself. And you know, that's something that can't really be taken away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you do that and like you find the love of it, like just doing it for the sake of it, and then you kind of find a way to like channel that, you know, into what you want to do with your life, then that's kind of where you hit a stride, I think. And that's something I'm still working at, you know, but it's also something that I try to keep in mind as I
Mm.
work on things.
Yeah, because so you're talking about like a couple like roadblocks and stuff that you had to kind of go through and conquer. Like, what were some of those for you?
Oh yeah. Okay. So one of the big ones was the support thing. Like
Hmm.
my family, you know, like I said earlier, like they're immigrants, you know, they immigrated
Hmm.
here from Nigeria. And so there was an element of, because they want us to be secure in this country, you know what I mean? They wanted
Hmm.
us to be in a position where we were financially like okay. You know, they would be like, okay, well, you need to like lean towards sure thing fields, you know, like
Yes.
engineering and you know, STEM and you know,
Hmm.
all of those things, you know, medicine. And because of that, you know, the arts were not exactly a prime field
Yes.
for that. You know, there was a lot of, hey, that's not a sure thing. You don't want to take risks with your future and gamble on something that might not work out, you know.
Hmm.
And you know, as a kid, that's not what you want to hear, obviously. And it's like it's that was very discouraging, you know, feeling like, oh, they don't support me or they don't believe in me. And as you
Hmm.
know, as I've gotten older, in a weird way, like looking back at the stuff I was making, I kind of get it. You know what I mean? Like like
Yeah.
it wasn't great. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't great stuff. I wasn't like a prodigy. You know what I mean? I
You're
drew a
like, I
lot,
have a
but I wasn't
dream, and they walk in and
right.
you're like drawing like Sonic naked or something, like
This is what I'm saying, man. Like that's exactly what I mean. Like we talk a lot about, you know, how our parents maybe didn't believe in us, but I think sometimes I'm like, if
They were
I
right.
today looked at the stuff I was making, I'd probably be like, geez, man, maybe hit the books a little. But like, and and that's not to say that like it wasn't discouraging, and I don't wish I'd had a little bit more of a, hey, you know, hey, you could do this. You should just practice more. You know, there was an element of the fact that I wasn't very good, and that's another roadblock, is that, you know, a lot of people think that you need to be talented, you need to be like, you know,
Hmm.
you need to just have that vision, you need to be able to like immediately execute your ideas, you need to be able to draw without reference, you need to be able to draw things perfectly, you need to be able to have a set art style, all of these things that people have piled on to the idea of what an artist is, and none of those things are really true. And I have like a couple controversial takes about it where it's like,
Oh,
I
let's
think
hear
that, all
it.
right, okay, I mean, I don't know if it's that controversial, but it's like it's something that I feel very strongly, which is that because art is something that we teach now, there is a temptation for us to view it as some sort of very specific science, where it's like, you do it this way, this is the way you do it. You learn all of these things first, and then you can start, doing all of these things, all the things you want to make. If you want to do cartoons, you need to learn everything first, and then you start cartooning. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, you need to know how to draw a realistic face before you draw a cartoon face, all of that stuff. And that's valid in some ways, for sure. But I think it deters people from expressing themselves through their art, because the thing is, before art was taught, it was just people making things the way they wanted to make it. It was just, I see this and I perceive it a certain way, and my perspective on it is this. And they just represented it however they did. And there was no like, oh, gee, man, I really have this idea and I'm really inspired by this thing, but I need to go sit down and learn, how to draw perspective lines and draw all these things, and like, make sure all my proportions are in order. And it's like, those things are useful. They're useful building blocks. However, art was art, and then it was broken down to a science. And I think that a lot of people lose the self-expression element in pursuing the science element of it, which is breaking down like figure and form and shape and all those things. Very important, but also it is very important to keep that part of yourself that is just a perceptive eye that sees things, internalizes it, and then expresses it. You know what I mean? Like, that is just an inherent human thing. And I feel like if that were something that more people were like introduced to earlier on, less people would quit doing art. You know what I mean? More people would just express themselves however. And then if they want to learn a certain set of skills, they can do that. If they want to work in an industry that requires consistency in your figures and all of that stuff, those are important things to learn. However, art shouldn't be gate kept to the extent that it is. Anybody can create art if they're, if they have a vision for something and they want to create it and they want to put it down through whatever medium. Anyone can do it. And I feel like a lot of people get caught in this trap where they feel like artist is like a type of being that you just have to be born as, when that's not the truth. You just
So you're telling me that Boog the Caveman didn't get a bundle on Skillshare and sign up for Cave Painting 101 and learn how to draw a 3 men slay wildebeests?
I'll be honest. Actually, cavemen, they did do that. Unfortunately,
actually, Grog did have a 4.1 average in.
Early man, they were teaching the rule of thirds in the caves like really early on. Like they really had to lock that in really really quickly. The cave paintings were no joke. Those had to be a sign.
I do. No, I was just gonna say, I do think this is so true, and I think this is something that is so pervasive in like any artist's life. May you be like a professional working in animation, like a professional working in comics, or somebody who wants to get into any art industry or art field, that it's so true that it's so easy to lose the fun of it. I don't know if you can teach it, unfortunately, because like you said, at first you have fun and then you're like, well, I want to get better. So then you look up all the resources and you look up how to get better. And then you just have to remember to have fun, but it's easy to forget.
It's very, very easy to forget. And like, this was something I had to keep in mind, like, teaching myself animation was that like, there is a science to animation. However, there are so many different styles of animation, because it is such an expressive medium. You know what I mean? It's something that, there are ways to do it right, quote unquote. There are ways to do it, that are unconventional, but they're all valid because they're just the way people express themselves, And I think that, when we lose that element of, I can just do this the way I want to do it, we end up having more of a freeing experience. And I try to remember that as well. When I'm animating something, I'll be like, okay, I need to do it this way. I need to do it this way. And then I stop and I'm like, every form of animation that I've seen that I'm like, oh, that's new, that's different, came from somebody doing it the wrong way, technically. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's something very valuable about that, is remembering that new styles come about from somebody doing something that other people told them is not the right way to do it. You know what I mean? Like there are some of my favorite things, like Fooly Cooley, for example, was an anime that I loved, super short, like six episode. The whole thing with the animation style is that they broke a lot of rules. They did a lot of things that were experimental that people would be like, well, you're not supposed to do that. But it's like, yeah, but we did though. And people like it. And that element is so crucial where it's like, who's to say you can't do that? You know, who's to say you can't use multiple styles in the same animation or in the same comic, or like, you know, throw in like things that shouldn't necessarily be there but still work because they capture the same energy. And I
Yes.
feel like people get so caught up in the what should you do when it's like, why are there these rules? Why are there these rules on self-expression? A lot of them are guidelines to help you learn fundamentals, but it's like, if that's not what you are trying to do, if you're just having fun with self-expression, if you're just posting on social media for fun, you don't need to adhere to all these rules and laws. You can literally just make whatever you want. And I think people are getting more accustomed to that now with, like, you know, there's been a rise in more like independent animation and more just like
Yeah.
people doing their own projects. And so I think people are kind of catching on where it's like, I don't have to do things the traditional way. I don't have to do things in the way that I don't have to follow the footsteps of the people before me exactly. I can chart my own course. I can figure out my own thing. You know, I'll be watching something and I'll be like, that is the first time I've seen that animated like that. And I'm sure somebody told them that's not how you animate that. You're not supposed to do that. That breaks the rules of it. But I'm watching it and they did it and it looks cool. And, you know, sometimes I'll animate something quote unquote wrong and I'll be like, well, no, maybe that's just how I do it. Maybe that's my style.
Yeah.
And I think style is forged in a little bit of rule breaking. And so I think the rigidity of the idea of art as a science is something that holds a lot of people back when they could be having a lot more fun, you know, doing stuff.
Is there a specific example of that you can think of, that like in the way that you might draw something? Like, do you have a thing that you like to draw that technically isn't correct or breaks some sort of rule, or you just, I mean, it's okay if you're just talking completely generally, but if you have a specific thing that you could talk about, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so like I love drawing faces, for example. Faces are super fun for me to draw because you can make them whatever you want. And I feel like a facial expression, like we were talking about earlier, it captures a lot. There's a lot that you can say with a facial expression. And I feel like there are rules to drawing faces. There just are. And there are things that you're supposed to do, and there are ways that you're supposed to like create the face and like structure it and everything. But I have the most fun when I'm literally just riffing, when I'm just freestyling and just like making something the way that I want to make it, you know? Sometimes I like drawing a face just like super, super tiny on someone's like head. You know what I mean? Just like shrink it down, just make it a tiny little face because it just looks funny to me, you know? And yeah, it's not consistent with the rest of the art, but it is like it's more expressive that way.
Can I share a very simple one to draw? So when I was on the show The Midnight Gospel, one of the things that made me laugh the most is Penn would send us like a drawing of how he pictured someone holding a gun, and it would just be this little paw, and then
Yes!
it would be this gun just not even in the hand, and it makes
just floating.
Dude, it made me laugh so much, and I was like, why am I not drawing like a hand and then the gun is just upside down? Like what, why why do I always need to draw it just perfect? That's so
exactly
like having a drawing where like the person isn't even like holding the holster, or isn't even holding the grip, like it's just through that, and like that. There's so many things that you can do, and all of a sudden you're opened up to a whole new realm of like physical comedy, and it's subtle and it's stupid.
Yeah, because it's like, why not? You know, like why not do that? It's great. Like like getting to break the rules and just kind of like make stuff because it makes you laugh is some of the best stuff that I can imagine. You know what I mean? It's like, even in something so simple like drawing wrinkles, right? There's no like people draw wrinkles in very specific ways, but like when I draw like for example like a sleeve, I'll have like a sleeve bend here, and then I'll have like the hand coming here, or whatever, and like however you want to draw your hand, I draw like little sausage fingers, and then but like for here, I'll just randomly just anywhere just to make it look wrinkly. You know what I mean? There's no real rhyme or reason to it. Somebody like because I sent a drawing to somebody and they were like, "Hey, like this looks wrong. That looks wrong." And I was like, "I don't know.
No
I just like drawing it
way.
like that." Yeah. I was
That's
like, "I
so
just like drawing it like
funny.
that." It's like that's just funny to me. You know what I mean? And then sometimes I'll draw hands that are anatomically correct, and then sometimes I'll just do like that, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
And I love doing that. And I think part of that was very inspired by Adventure Time because
Yeah.
like that was a big thing about Adventure Time. It's like they had structure for the most part, but it was very simple. You could have an arm like that, but then sometimes you have an arm that's just all over the place, And I love that, and so like kind of taking something that should be drawn a certain way and then
This is somebody counting.
so good. That is so good. Tiny face, yeah, exactly
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and that's why I've
You know
always
what I
thought
mean?
that AI was such an innovator.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They're really good
Just
at,
because
like,
the
taking
hands.
something.
They saw
Yeah,
a rule
hands
and they
like
broke it.
exactly. They were like, how hands have 5 fingers? Let's like let's not do that.
Let's like
let's give
not
them,
know what fingers are. Like
yeah, let's actually terrify people.
To be
And,
to
like,
be
make
fair though, it's like because the drawings are like so realistic and the rendering is so realistic, having just one thing, it's that whole thing about like Uncanny Valley where
Mhm.
it's like
Mhm.
sometimes it becomes comedy, but if you're too close to reality but not enough, it's
It's
like
unsettling.
uncanny. Yeah, it's like that. It becomes horror all of a sudden.
Exactly. Exactly. And like, yeah, that's the whole thing with AI, especially. It's like something will look totally normal, and then you start investigating further, and you're like, oh no, I don't like that at all. I don't like
One
that
of
at all.
one of my favorite exercises, and it's something that I do with my friends when I draw with them, is I'll take something that they draw, and then like how does that pose get pushed even more back back into the head, like like the face is like fucking, it's just sucking up
Just
this
warped.
this head, and like, and then we just go back and forth until it's just like completely unrecognizable. But I think that's a good thing to do even with yourself. Like maybe your first version, like could you push that more? Could you push an expression more and make it more ridiculous?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's like just to see how far you can take it, because there have definitely been times where I've been working on like a chapter of my comic, and I'll draw like a reaction face, and I'll be like, that's funny, but then I'll revisit it later, and I'll be like, that isn't like enough. You know what I mean? It could be even zanier. Like I could push that pose. I could make it look a little, more interesting, because it's like, why not? I think once you get to that why not phase of like, oh, it doesn't have to look normal at all. You could make it whatever you want it to be. You start to really like throw whatever at the wall, and then you get surprised at what sticks, you know? Like I'll draw something, I'll be like, that was a last second addition, but it just adds something to it, by having it be way more extra than you were originally planning.
I think it's so funny too that in your comic you have like so Vibe Fairy is like super realistic in a way and like very like stoic, and having this
Uh-huh.
little like crazy cartoon character is just like the difference between the
Yes.
two of them is just so good. And I love the way that you were talking about how you came up with these characters, and that's why I got so excited when you talked about like studying psychology, because I feel like psychology is so important to like writing characters. And I guess the question would be like kind of like, have you always written, or like how was your process like starting to write, and I guess your process writing in general, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. My process is admittedly, it's very haphazard. I really like the idea of dialogue being written like on the fly. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like spontaneous. It's like it flows like a regular conversation. Like because even if I were to script something out, I know for a fact I would change things at the last second based on what I feel would be funnier in the moment. You
Mm,
know, and like I'll look at something like Adventure Time, which was like super influential to me.
mm,
Like there was something about the dialogue that felt very casual, and some of the
mm,
funniest stuff came about from just like the most like innocuous basic interactions where it's like why are you saying it like that, like why are you like just the fact that it's not a joke, it's just the fact that somebody is saying something in
mm,
like a funny way, or somebody is saying something so normally that it's like hilarious, you know? And so
mm,
like when I write a joke, sometimes the joke is that they're reacting so normally to what they're saying that it's like it's almost like an anti-joke. You know what I
mm.
mean?
Yeah.
And so like honestly, when I write comedy, especially when I'm writing dialogue, which I love writing, a lot of it is very much on the fly. It's the last thing I do, actually. Like
Really?
I
That's
know,
crazy.
yeah, I'll have a rough idea. It's like it's weird because it's like a board driven comic in that I'll have an idea of what I want to happen,
Hmm.
and then I'll know how I want like the visual gags to be. But then it's like when it comes to the dialogue, I know what I want them to say in like a paraphrase kind of way. And then when I'm
Hmm.
writing it, the actual way that I phrase it is completely spontaneous. So like I'll know what they're saying in a general sense, and then when I go in, I'm like, all right, how do I say this in a funnier way? Especially with the vibe fairy, because his language, like his manner of speaking, is so verbose
Yes.
that like I'll have an idea of what he's communicating, and then when I'm actually writing the actual dialogue, I basically just say it in the most dramatic and over the top way humanly possible, which makes it a lot of fun because I juxtapose that with like when I write my own character, and it's the most casual like shorthand ways of saying things, you know. And then you have this guy who's just like borderline Shakespearean in the way that he talks about things. And that makes it really fun. It's just like that dynamic where it's like one person is speaking very normally and the other person is like giving a long ornate monologue. It's great
Yeah.
fun. It's
Yeah.
great fun. I have a lot of fun doing that, you know.
I think it's yeah, it's just so funny. It's just so funny how you decided for him to be like so big and buff and stoic. Like it's just like all of these different qualities. Because he is his own character. Like I don't think I've yet seen a character like that because he's not just like buff physically, but like his mind is buff, kind of, I guess, is the idea.
he's he's mentally and spiritually buff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just really funny.
He's just like holistically healthy, you know. And I think that was something that was really cool to me where it's like in mind and body, he's like he'd say something like, you know, the
Yeah.
you know, to sharpen one's mind and to sharpen one's body is one and the same, stuff like that, you know. Because it's like it's almost like if a fitness influencer actually did have all the answers in a way, you know, because everyone knows like, you know, fitness influencers, they have a lot to say about like, you know, life advice. Like they don't stop at, you know, hey, we're gonna give you massive pecs. They're like, no, we're gonna teach you how to live your life. We're gonna teach you why waking up at 5 a.m. helps you, you know, become a better husband or whatever. It's like stuff like that. And it's like I was like, what if we have like somebody who's like, hey, you know, take care of your body, but then your spirit is also just as important. And he's like actually teaching you like, you know, ways to actually strengthen your mind and your heart and all that stuff. And I thought that was like a really endearing thing where it's like it's easy to poke fun at it, but it's like what if I played it like for jokes, but then it's also earnest in
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a way that's funny, you know. I kind of avoid the cynicism of it all because I feel like the fact that it is played earnestly in and of itself makes it kind of funny, you know.
I think that's why the comic is so charming, is it's so earnest, you know what I mean? Like the internet sometimes can feel very cynical and a little bit like sad, I guess, in a way, but like your comic is like has so much like joy and like hope that comes with that. I think the earnestness of your writing. Yeah.
Oh, that means a lot. I'm glad that that comes through.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's super clear. I mean, also, I'm sure that it feels Nice to have validation that the thing that you're trying to communicate comes across.
Oh, big time.
I was gonna say that I was imagining a fitness influencer who's like studies show that people that work towards being unhappy are 10 times more likely to be happy. So you want to get up at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, make yourself miserable so that you can become happy and see those gains.
I think they may be onto something. That sounds right upon first glance, I'm like, that's because it sounds so wrong. I think that means it's right in a way.
Do you hate kale? Eat 10 times more kale to expand your smile 5 inches.
Just like, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, I never would have thought of that. So that must be the key, obviously. And I think that there's something beautiful about that, Like, I think especially with real like advice, it's funny how much real advice and like, the kind of pie in the sky spiritual advice really go hand in hand. Like the stuff that it's like, it's in the same way that a lot of like religious teachings are and practices are rooted in just like things that humans learned are just healthy for the body and healthy for the mind. And then they were incorporated into like religious practice as like just healthy habits, things like that. It's like how a lot of the concepts of like meditation, and then like people will, on the actual like physician side will be like, hey, breathing exercises can be good for reducing stress, stuff like that. And it's like, how is that different from like meditation and all of these things that are considered spiritual practices? There are a lot of things that really do overlap. And I think that it's a really interesting exploration of how something can sound super complicated and super like mystical, but then can really have practical application. And even just exploring that is fun, where it's like somebody says something and then you translate it. You're like, can you say that in English, please? And then they say it and you're like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's a really fascinating thing. I really like playing around with that because it's a funny thing that I observe about people, where a lot of people are saying the same thing and don't quite realize it. It's like you think that these two ideas are at odds, but you're really at the core saying the exact same thing. And so putting two characters together where it's like they're trying to bridge this language barrier of like how to progress, how to like grow as a person, and then they realize, hey, we're kind of on the same page here, but just we have different ways of putting it. We have different experiences. We're coming from different worlds, and like trying to find that middle ground of like literal interpretation and like mystical wooism.
That's so true. I feel like it's funny because I don't know how you kind of look into if you were already kind of interested in spirituality before writing your comic, or if it's something that you started researching for the comic. But it's true that like when you start looking into spirituality and mental health and physical health and all of these different kind of things, you start hearing the same thing but said in a different way. And sometimes you need to hear the same thing told 10 different ways until like at the 10th time it's like, now it makes sense. Like the 9 previous times that you heard it, it was like, I guess I sort of get it, but then like the 10th time is the one that makes it like crystal clear kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. Like that's very true. Like sometimes something does need to be like drilled into your head for you to finally get it. The idea that you don't really want to hear it until it suddenly like clicks for you, and then you're like, oh, okay, maybe you were onto something. Maybe you were saying something that like actually makes sense. And then like even in vibe check, it's like it doesn't really click. And this was kind of deliberate. It didn't click for the main character until it was directly related to something that he had experienced himself, like firsthand, where it's like, all right, let me make this real for you. Let me relate it to this thing that matters to you. And then it starts to kind of make sense. And I think that's like, for me, a lot of lessons have come that way, where it's like, I'll know the right thing, or like I've heard the word of wisdom and I've heard like here's the proverb or whatever. But then it's like, when it relates to something directly in your life that you can really point to as like a practical application, then you're like, okay, I see what you were saying. I see what that actually means now. Yeah. And that's a really cool thing about just communicating ideas, which is that like sometimes you just need to relate on a like a middle ground. You need to meet in the middle and be like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what I'm trying to say, and this is how it relates to you, and this is why it matters. And that's why for me it was fun to write, is that I'm communicating lessons that I've learned or that I'm still learning in through the lens of like, okay, what if somebody doesn't understand humanity and is trying to like explain things in a way that is completely unrelatable, and then in the process of me trying to explain how things work, I'm like learning myself, you know?
Yeah.
It's like that juxtaposition really breeds like conflict, and that conflict breeds like understanding in an interesting way. And it's also just goofy as shit. So it's like it kind of, and also you get like the both and of like it's silly and goofy, but then you can also like talk about some stuff that really matters to you, which is something I love about the medium just in general.
Yeah, it's like when you refuse to read anything except for energy drink labels, and then you fight poison with poison finally clicks, and poison energy drinks takes over your life, and you get involved in a pyramid scheme, and you're trying to get all your friends to sign up for poison energy drinks.
Exactly. It finally clicks, and then you realize, hey, my mission in life is to convert other people to this multi-level marketing plan, and get them all to hawk these energy drinks. And then you'll finally understand, like, this is what my purpose is. This is what my actual meaning of life is. And sometimes it just takes that like 16th night in a row being up, chugging your energy drinks. And then you realize, hey, this matters to me for a very specific reason. Like, this speaks to me on a spiritual level. And then you just want to get other people involved. You know
and then
what I mean?
all of your friends are in the hospital. You're with your
all
friends.
Of them in the hospital.
We're all in the hospital.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And that recovery itself, that the process of like getting your vitals back on track, that in and of itself is a journey of self-discovery.
This wing of the hospital is sponsored by Poison Energy Drink.
Exactly. You got a hospital sponsorship. You can get doctors involved. Perfect.
Yeah, it says like wake up your platelets, like on the label.
Wake up your platelets.
wake up your hemoglobin. Wake up your white blood cells.
That I bet you some exec at Five Gum is sitting there like, man, why didn't I think of that? It's so good. Wake up your platelets. Are you kidding me? It's gold. Put that on a hoodie. I'd wear it.
That's new merch for Creative Block. The next drop.
Poison energy drink,
God.
the #1 energy drink used by chemotherapists.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Blast your freaking cancer with poison energy drinks.
I bet that could work. Look, you know that charged lemonade at Starbucks? Not Starbucks. It's at a Panera.
Yeah.
Panera, that charged lemonade. I bet that either fights cancer or causes it.
I mean,
it's something.
Some of those processes do seem like fighting fire with fire, though.
Honestly,
a little
in a way,
bit.
I think that's the motto for the evening. Really, is fight fire with fire. You know, if you have an unhealthy habit, double down.
Yeah,
double down, and then it cancels out. It's PEMDAS.
I've always thought of chemotherapy as the poison energy drink of the medical procedure field.
Oh my God, dude.
You know, I can get behind that. I think energy drinks really are the radiation of liquids in a way. You know,
V's like, why do I have Sean co-hosting this podcast?
No, I think it's funny, but I was like, I almost went down a path, and I was like, that's too dark. I gotta pull back before I even go there.
I guess somebody has to, because I'm not doing any self-control at all. I got let off my leash.
Yeah, I was like, is this the part where the podcast goes off the rails? I hope so.
Yeah.
I need a vibe check.
For that point.
Sean's
Right
the
now.
funny one, and I'm the NPR one, and so I'm the one with the like boring questions, and Sean's here to be like, but it's funny too, remember?
God, it's like you have Joe Rogan, and then you have an NPR host, and they're interviewing a clown. Like, that's basically.
Does anybody
The hell out of
have
that, though.
any blue chakra to spare? Because I need purple.
I
need some
fresh
purple.
out. I am fresh out.
Fresh out.
Purple chakra sounds like an energy drink in and of itself, if we're being honest.
Poison energy drink is kind of like the Joe Rogan of energy drinks, I feel like.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I'm starting to think this is a real brand. Is this like like poison
This
energy?
is all made up. This is all made up.
No.
But like, there's a thing that you gotta know about Sean is that he will. What was the schools that you came up with? These schools, dream schools, something schools.
Dream School? Digi Skulls.
Skulls. And like we talked about it for so long that I almost became the same thing started happening to me. I was like, this sounds like it's real, because then you had like this
That's
theme song and you had them in 3D floating around, and I was like, I feel like this is a real show.
Yeah, dude, we
With
are
lots of
masters of our
media.
own reality. We are playing pretend for a living, you know? So, like, sometimes that
so
leaks out.
true.
Sometimes I have some stuff leak out, and that's why I'm in the hospital.
Real. Look, I think that is expert level committal to the bit. It's committing.
Appreciate you.
You gotta take the bit all the way to the end. Like that's the thing. I talk to people, like my friends who know me in person. A lot of times they're like, your sense of humor on Instagram is very different, you know, and in your comics is different than like your humor in real life. And I say, how, right? And essentially what it is, the difference is in person, my sense of humor is just like I will yes and whatever ridiculous thing someone says
Yeah.
until it goes completely off the rails. We'll joke about the same thing ad nauseum until you know you're beating a dead horse and then you beat that dead horse into the ground.
Just chaotic cooperation. Just like
yeah, chaotic cooperation. It's
That
like
is
no
so
one's
good.
checking anybody. It's like, you know how there's the concept of like the crazy character and the straight man.
Yeah.
It's like that, except there is no straight man. It just goes off the rails.
it's like
It just
a
descends
crazy character and a yes-ander. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it just escalates. And then people who enter the conversation afterwards, they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. It's imperceptible, you know,
Have
to
you
the
guys-
average person.
Have you guys watched Bo 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 Bo?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
Bo Bo Bo?
A long time
I feel
ago.
like that's
my
exactly what
God.
you're describing, which this manga, I didn't watch it as an anime form. I watched snippets of the anime and I'm like, I think this is too high energy for me. But the manga, I was crying. I was like crying because it's so, that's
It's
what it is.
insane.
You're
It's
you're
insane.
you're in the mind of somebody going off the rails all the time, and everybody's yes ending each other, and it's just insane.
Yeah, I describe Bobo 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 Bo as like what somebody who doesn't like anime thinks anime is.
Yes,
Like it's
that's so
just
true.
absolutely bananas. It's like a buff dude in sunglasses who fights with his nose hair, and
yeah, that's
and
true.
he's friends with a torpedo. Like it's like stuff like that. It's like
Yeah.
just nonsense.
I'm
But it's incredible stuff.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
I'm
It's-
imagining V trying to like oh, the show's too fast for me, and then V looks up the comic and he's like, I'm just gonna stay on this panel for a little bit longer. like just going like really slow reading it so it doesn't get too fast for you on the comic.
Exactly.
It's just so crazy
You
because
read
there's
at your
so
own
many
pace.
ideas. Like it's like a mile a minute, and so when you go from a panel to another, I don't know how to describe it, but I think that's what I love about comics is that as the reader, you have a little bit more what's the word? Like it's not power, but it's you have a little bit more agency how you
Mhm.
interact with the media. And so like you can take as much time as you need to read a panel because sometimes you're
Uh-huh.
just like, how the fuck did I get here? Because you know,
Yeah, you
and
can
you
just
can
go
go
back to the
back.
previous panel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
You'd
you're
be
like,
did I miss something?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well,
but with I feel like with animation or like with anime, like I mean, you potentially you can pause and go back, but it's not as fluid, and
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know
just
how.
blasting your synapses.
Yeah.
I think that all of this has been like a funny just a good demonstration in like how like a lot of like collaborative writing ends up getting done. A lot of like springboarding and yes ending and creating a concept from scratch and then like running with it. Do you ever use that in your writing process? Do you like joke around with your friends and like, oh, I got to use that for this thing, or like I was just curious.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, it's usually not intentional. It's usually just the way that I talk to my friends tends to be very like it's just comedic. It's like there are some friends where we communicate almost exclusively through bits, and so it's like you don't know where the actual conversation begins and like the joke ends, and so a lot of our communication is purely like just set up and payoff back and forth. And so that really helps in writing dialogue because I'm like, what if I'm writing two characters who are just riffing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so sometimes if I have a comic where it needs to go into a certain direction, I have to like pull back and like I have to like, okay, this character has to respond with like a serious response because my instinct is to have like riffs off something the person said and then they just keep riffing back and forth, but then it doesn't always work out that way, which is why I have to like use restraint. Because if I just wrote comedy the way that like I always think it's funny. It's like the way that I do it, it would just devolve into just like madness, essentially. It's just chaos, you know?
That's so interesting. And I love that you bring that up because I do feel like when I read your comic, it feels like your writing feels very tight. It's like, okay, you in your chapter or your episode, you kind of have like a main theme and your characters interacting around that theme. You do have like a little hook at the end or like a payoff, but it does feel pretty grounded. Like the jokes never because I feel like sometimes when you read some web comics, it starts with a joke. Like I don't know if you've seen that one. It's a Scooby-Doo riff comic where it was just like the joke.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I love that beginning because for me the funniest thing was just like it's just raggy at the end. That's all like
Yes. No,
and then
no, it's called I think it's called Scoob and Shag. I think that's what it's called
that is
on
what
Webtoon.
it
I was
is.
like, I don't want us to get through this without like actually shouting out the actual comic because that comic is so funny. It's so good.
Do we have to take a research moment real quick and look it up?
No, that's what it's called. It's Scoob and Shag.
And I need to find the author's name because it's
And it's so, but it's like at first you have this very like structured joke structure, and then eventually it becomes really insane. And then there was a moment I was like, oh, it's like I feel for me that comic is like a good example of like, okay, this goes really like off the rails insane.
Exactly.
But it's so funny. And that's what's so hard about doing serialized comics is that there's a moment, like if you don't figure out your own, I guess, like structure, then it's easy to just kind of like just go completely insane with it, right?
Yeah, and that was something I ran into when I first started with Webtoon Originals, which is that Vibe Check originally was kind of just like a gag strip. It was just like an episodic. I had a funny idea for these characters, and I just throw them into like a situation for 10 panels. But then, like, when I got the offer to do it, like to make it for Originals, I thought to myself, I was like, this could be a cool opportunity to really like explore the development of these characters because even in the like little Instagram comics, they did kind of have an arc as characters where it's like it starts off as this weirdo again, like why is this guy following me? Why is this guy popping out of my cereal bowl and telling me to like, meditate and get my chakras right? But then it evolves into like they're friends, like they're buddies. They like they just like live together and they hang out and like all the shenanigans becomes normal. And I was like, I wanted to really explore how that kind of friendship comes about. So I wanted to like actually write a story around it and have like a narrative even though it's still like structured as a comedic gag strip, it has elements of a through line. It has a story. It has stakes and like character development as you go on. And I feel like that kind of helped in the comedy where it's like these characters are growing, but because of that, their dynamic is shifting and the comedy shifts with it, Where it's like one character is super serious and the other one is super goofy, but then it evolves into like one is so serious that like he plays things completely literally, and then the one who's kind of like the quote unquote goofy one, because he's more familiar with human customs, is like the one reacting and like, hey, no, like this is how it's supposed to be done. And then the other guy's just like, it's like the back and forth changes because the characters are growing. And so like working them to the point where the comedy is like my ideal like recipe. And that's really what I'm trying to explore with season 2 is these two are already friends now, and like here's what it's like when they're like hanging out and doing things together and just being buddies.
Yeah, I'm so excited for what you're gonna do with season 2 because I'm like, oh, like are they gonna go like somewhere different? I'm like, oh, this is gonna be like adventure and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about like your process for like Webtoons? Because you have an editor and kind of like, do you have a schedule? How do you plan your releases? What's the Webtoon artist life like?
Yes, it's really interesting. It's the biggest thing that scared me at first about Webtoon was the deadlines, where it's like you can't just really go at your own pace. Like you have to know what your workflow is like so that you can get your stuff in on time. You know what I mean? And Webtoon is smart in that they have a system where you do a lot of stuff on the front end so you can kind of work ahead of what's releasing. And that helps a lot. But essentially like the day-to-day is just like kind of knowing what you want to make, like, and knowing how many you can get done per like week. It's like a week to week thing mainly. And so a lot of that is difficult because it's like a lot of it is self-managing. And that's very difficult. And like I feel like a lot of artists can relate to the idea that, you know, when you have to meet a deadline, it's hard to like feel like you're coming up with creative ideas fast enough and like make stuff in some kind of timely manner so that you're not like falling behind your schedule, because you know you don't want to leave your, you know, your readers in suspense. And you know I definitely fell into that a bit, you know, with my first season, where it's like, oh man, I need to like get this idea out, but it's not where I want it to be, but I also need to release something. And I think it's scary, but it's also a good practice on like executing ideas quickly and like not just sitting on it, because the thing is it's very easy to not do anything when you feel overwhelmed with like deadlines, or like when you feel like, okay, I have this idea and it's not perfect, you just sit on it, right? But with like Webtoon, you can't really do that. You have a schedule, you need to like release the things, and so it does kind of help you kick yourself into gear and make something, you know, rather than being paralyzed. And so that's helped me a lot, even when it's like a non-Webtoon thing I'm working on, to kind of like, if I have an idea, I need to learn to execute that and like get it done, even if it's not perfect, quote unquote. It's like I need to release something. And so it has been helpful with that for sure, even though like at first it was the most stressful thing ever, but it's a learning experience for sure.
How would you say your process has changed from when you started Webtoons and now?
The process, interesting. So I think the biggest change in my process is that I spend a lot more time ironing out execution over idea, in that it's like I think about the idea, but then I also think about, okay, how can I actually execute this realistically? Like, what are my capabilities? What am I capable of doing, and in how much time? And that requires knowing yourself. You know, it requires confronting, all right, I'm a procrastinator. I'm somebody where I take a lot of time to do these things, and like I spend a lot of time, you know, on this part of the process, and inking takes me forever, and like coming up with, you know, the actual dialogue is fast, but I save it for last. And so, you know, I have to do all of these steps first. And so it's helped me streamline my process a bit, in that I have to know what my workflow is before I get into something. Like I have to know how I'm going to execute it. I have to know how many panels are needed for a joke. That's a big thing. Even for Instagram, I'll be like, I only get 10, but because I'm so used to doing Webtoon, it's like, okay, I kind of know exactly how many panels I need to tell this joke, you know? And that definitely helps in that regard. And that's been a big change for my process, because I would really wing it beforehand. I would be like, all right, I'm just going to start drawing stuff. And then if something else tickles my fancy, I guess, in terms of this concept, then I'll just throw that in. But now it's a lot more like, how do I execute this like efficiently? You know, efficiency has definitely been added to the process for sure. I keep saying for sure.
For sure.
For sure.
I'm just very sure about what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're gonna go like doubtful.
I'm like, no, for sure, trust me.
Receipts. Give us the receipts.
Exactly.
Sorry, go.
So there's kind of two other questions that I really wanted to ask you. I think I'm going to start with kind of the social media. Kind of what's your relationship with social media? Do you feel like you have to post on it a lot? Do you feel like it's like an important part to promoting the Webtoon? Like, yeah, tell us a little bit.
Okay. So that's really interesting to me, because social media for me was always just like for fun. You know, like it was just like, oh, this is just something I do on the side. This is just where I post my like random nonsense. And so like when I started the Webtoon, I was like, I felt weird promoting it almost, because I'm like, even though it's free to read and like you don't have to pay money or anything, I was still like, I feel bad like asking people to go check something out that I'm making, and like, you know, hey, support me over here or do this thing. And like there's this idea of like goodwill that you have with your audience. There's an amount that you are given. And it's like I was afraid to like use up my goodwill by, you know, asking them to read this other thing that I'm making. When in reality, people tend to be really happy to support you. But that's to say that like social media, I feel weird using it as a professional tool, but it is something that's necessary. And so like nowadays, I use it as a motivator to make things that I already want to make, because it's like, okay, well, I have a place to put it. But like it's draining as well. It can get overwhelming. And so like I try to be better at it, and I really do want to be more active on it, but I find myself like struggling because I feel like I need to use it as a tool professionally. But then I also feel like because of the nature of social media nowadays, it's a lot of pressure, and I kind of sometimes miss the just sheer fun of it. And so it's tricky, but I also am lucky enough to have like a really cool audience on there. And like, you know, like the people who check out my stuff and who really like my stuff are so funny. Like they're some of the funniest people I have ever come across on social media. Just like the people who comment on my stuff, and like the people who are like, you know, frequent watchers or frequent readers, you know, they're absolutely hilarious. I constantly tell people that like the people who read my comics are legitimately funnier than I am. Their comments, I'll read them and I'll be like, how do people even think to say this outlandish shit? You know, like,
I
but
agree.
it's
For sure.
I feel
great.
like
It's so good.
sometimes I get comments like on the comics I post, and I'm like, damn, I'm kind of mad that they came up with that, because I wish I came up with that. You know?
Exactly. It's frustrating, but it's really great knowing
Yeah.
that you found your people. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like these folks
exactly.
get it. Like these folks get it. And like because my humor is so, it's not even like all that, I wouldn't even say it's all that like unique. It's just like it's very much authentically what I find funny, that when I find people who genuinely like resonate with it, it makes me really happy. And the fact that a lot of times like people just roll with it. Like I am so grateful for like the people that have supported me like this far, you know, because I'll put something out and I'll be like, oh man, I don't know how people are gonna react to this. I find it funny, but people probably aren't gonna. And then I'll put it out and people are like, hell yeah, man, like that's that's what I'm talking about. And I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know you guys were gonna roll with that one, you know, like even something as simple as like sharing anti-goose sentiment, you know what I mean? And the fact that there are so many people who are like in that same camp, they're like, wow, I had no idea. Like, because for me, that was a very like inside joke, like, you know, because my college campus, there were a lot of geese and they were just terrorizing the campus. Like they were just, it was awful. Like if you were walking to class, you'd be late, you know, people would be hungover walking to class, and then they walk past a group of geese and they just like chase them across campus. And so it's like, all right, well, geese are probably some of the most evil creatures on earth. And so I started making comics about it because I was like, oh, my friends will find this funny. And then I was getting comments from just like absolutely random people saying, dude, yeah, no, geese are the worst. Like I had that exact same experience. I was like, I didn't know this was a universal thing, but apparently so.
I think people throughout time have feared geese. I mean, goosebumps is like you're being scared. I feel like goose stepping was never a good thing. You know what I mean?
No, no, yeah.
And then silly goose, like that is someone who you don't take seriously. You know, I don't
Exactly.
hear very many goose compliments. You know,
That's true. That's very true, actually. You know what I mean? Like that's something that like throughout time, I feel like, you know, geese have just been associated with some kind of sinister, unsettling feeling, you know, and I think that's for good reason. Like they're not very sociable creatures. They're very, very territorial, very, very spiteful, very spiteful. I won't launch into my, you know, anti-goose propaganda here, but it's like it's a very visceral feeling. I was walking in the parking lot the other day, and there was just like a group of them, and it's like that feeling when you're gonna walk past a group of dudes who you know are gonna say some shit.
they're gonna
You know
fuck
what I
with you.
mean? Like, yeah, like they're just gonna mess with you. You know what I mean? And so you just go the other way. You know what I mean? It's like you just don't feel safe.
Dude, I'm so scared of like
Happen.
13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. That
It's so like that's
a group of
so
them.
real.
That's so
Yeah.
funny, because I feel like, okay, well, maybe it's just I just never come out of my place, and that's why I haven't encountered a group. But I guess no, I guess because there's like a school at the end of my street, and I see the kids walking by all the time. And I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm just such a creeper. But I look at the group of kids hanging out and just being kids, and I'm like, man, like life was so simple. You know, they were just like being like awful to each other and they're just like calling each other names or whatever. But I'm like, they're having fun. The kids are all
Just
right.
cyberbullying each other until it's,
Yeah.
you know, they all need
Builds
therapy at
character.
12.
Builds character. Yeah, everyone needs a little bit of a relentless bullying in their life to make them who they are. Makes you funny.
Makes you funny.
Or so I've heard.
I think that's true. I mean, I think you must have gone like through some shit to be funny. Or I mean that's anyway,
That
like,
sounded personal.
So no, that's listen, I think that you did a funny job of not holding back right there, V, and I think that was very brave of you.
Yeah, you know that was.
Maybe we don't need to talk
something.
about this.
No, you're like, you have to go through some shit to be funny. You're like, I have it on good authority, and I'm like, is this personal? You want to open up? Want to open up a little? Expand on that. Elaborate on that a little bit.
But before I expand on that, I want to get. I'm worried that we're not going to get to something that I really want to talk about with you. Is your music videos? You've animated two great, like, awesome music videos. One for Lil Wayne and one for Fredo Bang, and they're like so amazing. And I always kind of wonder what it's like making a music video for like a famous rapper.
You know, it's funny. I almost forgot until you mentioned it, but it's super cool. It's like the way that all came about was just really, really dope and really unexpected. Because like essentially what happened was I was reached out to by like a motion graphics artist who follows me, and he was just like, hey, I know somebody, like I work with an artist who's interested in doing an animation for his next song. And I was like, oh, that's pretty sick. Like that would be a really cool thing. I'll be like, yeah, I'd be down to hear him out and see what's up. And he connected us, and it turns out that this dude is like, you know, he works under like a major label, like, and like that was super cool. And it was a really fun experience because what I learned is that working in music videos a lot of times is very open-ended because they don't really give you much for the most part, at least in my experience.
It's so risky because they could just be like, I don't like this whole idea. You just
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Oh my
so they
gosh.
send you like a crunchy MP3 of the song, and they're like, all right, you just do whatever. And that was honestly, it was really dope. Like working with the actual music artist directly is a really different thing. And like it was just a matter of like he really trusted me. He was like, I like your stuff, just do what you do what like you feel works, like update me, but like just do what you want. And he really let me just take the lead. Like there was very little that he gave in the way of instructions. It was just like, hey, just do it, just make the thing, just do what you think is cool. And they really just let me do whatever. And I think that being able to just kind of express yourself and really like work with what kind of strikes you in the music is a really cool experience. You know, I've always loved music, and it's been like a huge part of what like inspires me. And like, you know, having the right song really does help in terms of like even drawing and like creating comics and animation and stuff like that. And so like getting to just listen to music and then just like interpret it how I see it, and being free to do that in whatever way works for me is really fun. And then like, you know, that first video directly led into the other one because somebody at the label was like, hey, we like your video, would you want to do another one?
Oh,
I was like, yeah, so that'd be cool. Sick. Yeah. And so doing that one was really exciting. And it was just like getting to work on a song for like an artist that I've, you know, been a fan of since I was a kid.
That is crazy.
And like having like an official animated like thing that I made be up on his like YouTube page is kind of crazy.
That's sick.
Yeah, imposter syndrome kicked my ass, I'll tell you that. But at the same time, it was cool getting to see that I didn't chicken out. Like I really tried to make it work, and I really like, you know, like it was scary. It was obviously really daunting, but to like sit down and like come up with ideas and then put them down and then have that feedback of like, no, this works, this is good, this is you did a good job, is really cool. Because there is a lot of isolation in animation where it's like you're sitting long hours, you're not getting a ton of feedback, you're working like for, you know, hours and hours on end, like obsessing over certain details, getting things to work. and you have no idea how it's going to be received because you were given no instructions.
Gosh,
And so
crazy.
Yeah, not to mention these turnaround times are.
Yeah, do you feel comfortable talking about it, or
I feel like I need to talk about it because this is a thing. Like we were talking about deadlines earlier.
I have this podium for you, sir.
Yes, of course. Let me grab my soapbox that I brought my soapbox from home. So basically, like for both of these music videos, both of them, I start to finish 2.5 weeks. Both of them.
No way. Are you kidding me? What?
Wait, each or total?
Oh no.
Okay, no, each. I mean, still crazy, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Oh, for both, I wouldn't be here today. Oh no, I would not. I wouldn't have made it.
Crazy, because they're so high quality. What the heck?
I appreciate that. I was panicking. That's how I was like, oh gosh, I need to make this, and I need to make it fast. And I was like, working really fast, and it's challenging. It is, but at the same time, I was motivated by the fact that I really didn't want to fuck it up mainly, but like I was also just like really motivated to make something cool because I was learning new things in the process of making this animation. Like I was really operating outside of my comfort zone. And so like essentially the way I saw it was I was essentially getting paid to learn more animation. And that was exciting to me. Was the fact that I could like dabble in figure out new techniques and do all this stuff. And they were paying me to do so. And so it felt less like, oh, I'm doing a job, and more like, oh, I'm playing around with animation using this song, and they're kind of like, paying me to do it. And that was really fun. That was a really fun way of looking at it. And so I was really motivated, and it was still scary, but it didn't feel like a slog like I feel like it could have. It felt more like a really exciting, scary new opportunity. So yeah, it was super, super cool. No idea how that happened still. Like it's still kind of surreal to me, but like I now have 2 music videos that I've done, which is soon to be 3 actually. But
really, well, you heard it first on Creative Blog.
We're cooking. No details yet, but it's like a little thing. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be cool.
That is so cool. This is like the most basic question ever, but like, what do you use to animate?
I use Clip Studio Paint.
Whoa, for
yeah,
that's crazy. Really, wow.
Yeah, for basically everything, because I started using it for Webtoon because it's a very Webtoon. Like it might as well be sponsored by Webtoon. It has like Webtoon export options, like because a lot of Webtoon creators use it. But I realized it had an animation feature, and I was like, well, I might as well like dabble in it since I already have the program. And I just fell in love with it. Like I just love the drawing tools and everything, and it's really cool. It's really cool. It's a really intuitive program. But like, I think the thing about it is that my animation process used to be medieval. Like it was rough. Like it was brutal. I described it to somebody the other day, and he was just like, dude, why would you torture yourself like this? Like I used to use Adobe Animate, and what I would do is I would do the rough animation in Adobe Animate, and then I hated the drawing tools in Adobe Animate. Like I hated drawing in it. Like I hated illustrating in it. So I would export the entire rough animation as an image sequence, and then import each individual frame into my drawing program, which was Sai, Then I would clean up all of the rough sketches as full drawings in Sai, and then re-import them into Adobe Animate, and then place all the frames in the right place. And that was my process, and it was a mess.
So you would still use like the functions of Adobe Animate, like tweening stuff around and like and all that stuff, but not do the actual drawings. That makes sense. I mean, it's messy, but I mean, a lot of animation is messy
and tedious. Yeah, it's messy and tedious, but it's like you still get like the functionality of it. I loved the features of it, but like the drawing itself was just a pain. And so Clip is like, it's the best of both worlds, where it has great features and functionality, but then drawing in it feels intuitive, where it's like you're using a regular illustration program, but then you can clean up all your animation in one program and then like export it from there. which is super cool for me. So like, you know, streamlining the process is great. And I switched in like 2023. So coming from my previous animation experience, it became a lot easier to like do animation start to finish, which was very, very encouraging. And that's kind of why my output increased with animation, because you know my process became less of a ordeal. You know.
Yeah, that's so encouraging for me to hear, because I've been slowly starting to use Clip Studio Paint, because I started in the Adobe Suite, right? And then I was just like, it's too expensive. I don't want to keep like putting so much money into Adobe, because like now it's like the subscription model, and so I started looking to alternatives, and that's how I started using Clip Studio Paint. And I really love it because the lasso tool and like the vector is so nice, and like you said, I think it's so nice to draw in it. I haven't yet gotten to animate in it, so it's cool to hear that.
Highly recommend.
I'm such a caveman, dude. I just animate everything in Animate. I do my illustrations in Animate. I do like,
oh my gosh,
I do my paintings in Animate, half of them.
You're crazy.
That's impressive. That's insane.
I use a lot of like gradients and half like opacities and stuff. So it's sort of like me trying to do the best I can with this like primitive program that hates me. I think I just have these comfort zones. I think it is a fault of mine, but you know.
But I mean, it's hard to switch programs. Like honestly, like for anybody listening, it might happen. It might happen in your lifetime, because you know Sean and I were so old. But we like you start using a program, and then you get really good at it, and then you're like, hell yeah, I'm never gonna. This is gonna be my ride or die. And then they do this fucked up thing where they like just hike up the prices and make it a monthly subscription model, and then
price
you're like,
gouging.
Yeah,
you're like, you gotta jump ship sometimes. Yeah. It's tricky. I respect the idea of committing to a program, like getting married to a program, because I still use Psy. I love Clip, and it would make sense to do my entire workflow in Clip because I import my drawings into Clip anyway. You know what I mean? But Psy is just like, it's what I've been using since I started digital art, and I'm so comfortable with it. And like the brush settings are perfect for me, and so I'm like, I'm probably always going to use Psy, you know. And I can't see something dethroning it per se. I'll learn new things, but I feel like my heart's always going to belong to that one program. And I think every artist has like a program that's like near and dear to their heart.
It's like their comfort zone, you know,
yeah, when you really want to like you show out, it's like I know this program inside and out. Like I can work wonders. I can do my magic in this one, you know. That's why there's some people who are still doing like Flipnote on the DS. Like they just mastered that. They mastered it, and now they're out here just making some absolutely insane masterpieces just because they absolutely like learned this one thing in and out, and they can do it like nobody else can. So there is something to like really, you know, finding your thing and then just like grasping it and mastering it. You know?
I only animate with Google Jamboard.
That's impressive.
No.
Let me tell you,
no onion skin, just like.
look. I'm telling you, because figuring this out is actually scary. Like it's really daunting, because I already have a weird thing about like I get nervous like doodling when people can see me like do the process, because I'm like, it's an awkward process. It's like clunky. I feel like I'm erasing and undoing, right? And then I've never really used like Jamboard before like this. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to figure it out. But then it's like, I'm not representing my drawing skills very well. You know, I'm freaking out, you know? And so like I like that's what it feels like using a new program, where you're like, if I start using it and I don't take to it immediately, I'm just like, oh, maybe I really can't draw.
Well, our podcast is a little bit like Hot Ones in that we subject our guests through like a very stressful thing that makes them doubt themselves and is very distracting, and it makes them feel like they can't draw. And we're like, hey, run through this gauntlet of drawing in the worst possible program to draw in. But the thing is I actually think that there's so many people that use so many drawing tricks that sometimes you end up coming across people who can't really draw. They just make it look like they can draw a little bit. And a program
True.
like this dissolves you down to your bones. You're just a fucking skelly on display, and you know, it's just your lines, just like your lines that are being interfered with by, you know, your internet and your like your, you know, whatever the primitive smoothing of this program, if there is any.
Yeah.
Like I'll draw something and the line will disappear. It's like, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Just
like,
kidding.
Oh and then, like,
fuck you.
And then, yeah, and then it reappears. I'm like, wait, no. It's like, it's so like, you know, I think that part of it though is fun. It's like you're figuring out how to like draw the way that you draw, but like using the tools that you have. And it's like you realize, no, sometimes I need to like adjust my style for the program that I'm using.
Yeah.
And like,
yes,
that's scary because your process is your process, and like that's why we get so like used to using one thing.
Yeah.
But like there is something kind of humbling about like, oh no, I need to change the way that I'm drawing to fit the tools that I'm using. And that in and of itself is like an exercise in patience and, you know, like your artistic acuity. Like, can I adapt? I adapt to this?
It's also so funny, like quick tangent, but like you're talking about like drawing in different programs, and I tried that one time with my webcomic where I usually draw in Storyboard Pro, where I have like my settings set up and all that, and my line is very like thick and kind of like squiggly. And then once I was like, you know what, I'll just kind of clean up my comic in Clip Studio Paint to see if I'm just as fast as Storyboard Pro. But the lines came out a little different, and I was like, this is fine, it still looks good. And I posted it, and then people had like this really funny reaction where they were like, wait, did you draw this? What is this? And then they read the description and they read that I drew it in another program, and they're like, oh my god, I knew something was off.
Something was different. Oh god.
Ever so slightly. I just thought it was so funny because like they kind of had this like kind of uncanny like reaction to like
something's different.
I've gotten to the point where I don't like when my drawings are too pretty. And like sometimes there's some of these programs are like they don't interfere with me enough. It's sort of like a character who like wears weighted clothing or has some sort of suppression gem.
Oh my gosh,
because their
like
chakra would kill everybody if they like walked around with it loose. Like so they wear something that, you know, like some sort of amulet that compresses it. I feel like that's what Adobe Animate does for me. Like I feel like if I allow myself to, I'm just getting distracted doing the texture on trees, and I'm supposed to have half this thing done by already, and I'm just trying to make everything look pretty. My stuff isn't supposed to be pretty. I don't know.
Yeah, like art's supposed to be an ordeal, you know. Sometimes it's supposed to be a little rough, a little ugly. You're supposed to suffer. Supposed to suffer a little bit.
I mean, if you want to be happy.
Yeah, you gotta suffer. You gotta suffer to be happy, man. Like, if you truly want to be happy, you need to get as miserable as possible, as fast as possible.
Join Uche's course, coaching course.
This is the running theme of this episode. I feel like you just
misery.
Feel like,
it's callbacks, dude. We're doing callbacks.
Heck man. Dude. Return to the bit.
You think I just forget jokes, dude? I'm like a freaking elephant about jokes.
Exactly. You gotta remember everything. You'll pull out a joke from like 45 minutes ago in the recording, and you're like, I almost forgot. It's like, no, you gotta remember. You gotta keep the running jokes running.
It's the same
lifeblood.
It's the same technique that I use to lie awake in bed at 3 a.m. and remember something I did when I was 12 and I said in school and I got embarrassed, you know, and I'm just lying awake.
That joke you said when you were 14 that nobody laughed at. Remember that time you told a joke and then the guy sitting next to you said it louder and then everybody laughed and then you looked like a fool and you were like, oh, it's my joke, and then everybody said stop being a square. Yeah. Think about that.
One time I talked my parents into getting this expensive hoodie, and I was so excited about it. I was like, this is gonna make me popular in school. This is really cool hoodie. And I got to school, and real big on the front, it said Pure Playa on the hoodie. And I was like 14, and like and just immediately, like 5 seconds in, a girl came up to me and was like, that's really disrespectful to women. And I was like class hadn't even started yet. And I was like, oh shit, I'm in for an ordeal. I didn't wear a shirt under this. No, I'm just kidding. I wore a shirt under this, but
Oh,
no, I did. Yeah, but
of all the criticisms of that shirt, that hoodie, I didn't think disrespectful to women was gonna be.
Yeah, I would have thought that someone would come up and say you're not. It's obvious that you're not.
Yeah.
Underneath.
Also, what a thing to say to somebody. Imagine that level of like that, the hater energy that takes to see somebody wear a shirt that says like pure playa, and you go up to them and point at them, and you're like, "You're not. You're not that.
You're not.
Funny.
You're not. This 14-year-old who wears Hawaiian shirts to school every day and tucks them into his khaki pants is not."
Look, they weren't ready for the drip. That's what happened. They were jealous. And they weren't ready for the drip.
No,
and
it's
they got
true.
upset,
It's true. It's
they
true.
were like, "We got to tear him down. We got to tear him down. They got to."
I hadn't earned the drip. I think it was the problem.
I don't know. Okay, not to make this a whole like gender debate, but it's true that the one time that somebody came up to me to like criticize my look was another girl, and she came up to me and she looked at my makeup and she was like, "You look like a clown," and then she like ran away, and I was just
sashayed away.
Wow. I was just like... it was really
Like,
You should hide her in the
that you just-
face.
It's funny to
Right,
me
I
when
was
when I think back to it, because I'm like, it's such a crazy thing to say, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm not gonna like take off my face, so I was just like, I'll just go to school.
Just
And
start sawing your face off.
Right.
No, dude.
Like, you should have just karate chopped her in the neck. That's what you should have done. Like, look,
I think-
here's the thing.
The sad part about the story though was that her friend came to see me after, and she apologized to me for the girl who was mean to me, and then I was like, ooh, I feel bad for this dynamic, and I felt good about myself because I was like, at least I don't have to do this.
That's so funny. You're like, oh man, they have to carpool here. That was probably an awkward car ride home. We're like, that was really mean what you said there. That was really mean what you said back. You didn't need to do that.
Exactly. I'm like,
That's one of those experiences, like someone just being mean to you. You just catch a stray for no reason. It's like the kind of thing that like somebody comes up to you and they just say something really mean. You're like, and it'll be the most random thing that you have never thought about in your life, wasn't an insecurity of yours, and then boom, you think about it for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like as a kid, someone approaches you, they're like, it was like one of the first days I ever wore like shorts in like to school, because it was like somebody came up and they were like, wow, you have really skinny legs, and I wanted to burst into flames. I was like, I have never considered that in my life.
That's something that I need to look at.
And now that is going to haunt me.
I don't even look down there.
I still think about that, dude. Like I still think about that. I'm like, damn.
Maybe they were short.
Oh,
Maybe
no.
they were like your legs were just in their face.
I don't know what it was, but I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that?
Okay.
it's so crazy.
Hey,
Yeah,
I don't know.
Thank you.
Because people are like looking, it's kind of this thing where it's like, why are you paying attention to my legs? It's kind of, it's like, there's so many other things to look at. Why out of all the things that are available for you to gaze upon, it was my skinny legs.
Hypothetical, Uche. You're at school, you're in the lunch line, some kid comes up, it says like the meanest possible thing to you, you have creative block. How do you deal with it in that moment? In that line.
So we're talking about how do I deal with creative block, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Creative block for me is a real challenge, because like I think I get into this mindset where creative ideas are just supposed to flow freely. Like they're just supposed to come naturally, because when you're an artist, you see yourself as a creative person almost inherently, because you kind of have to be. But there are times where just nothing is striking you, nothing is really inspiring you, and you feel stuck. And usually in situations like that, I'll look at things, and it's kind of cliche in a way, but like I just look at the things that inspire me. Like I'll watch the stuff that really motivates me to make things, because I look at things that are cool, that like remind me why I draw in the first place. For example, like if I watch a Studio Ghibli movie with or without creative block, I'm going to be thinking about like, oh man, it would be so cool to make something like this. If I'm watching like a particularly interesting or experimental animation, and I think to myself, dude, I wish I could create something as like inventive as that. And it really does spark something where you're reminded, oh yeah, I don't do this because I have to. I do it because I really think it's rad. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like going back in with that mindset usually unlocks something for me, like just kind of reminding myself, I do this because it's genuinely fun and it's how I express the things that I think are cool. And so sometimes I'll just need that little push of, hey, I really love this thing and I really want to like pay homage to this thing, or I really want to like do my spin on this kind of thing or express my ideas in a similar way. And that usually gets the ball rolling, because a lot of our creativity starts off a little bit derivative anyway. You know, we see something and we're like, I want to make that. You know, we start off with the cartoon characters we like, and then we just try to draw them over and over and over again. And we start making our own. But I think that that baseline inspiration, that like that thing of seeing something and that makes you want to create, that's always what kind of gets me back. And like a lot of times when I feel the most stuck, I'll stop and I'll realize, yeah, I haven't really watched anything in a while. I haven't really listened to any new music in a while. I haven't really been consuming art. And so like when I'm recycling the same kind of things that I've ingested, it gets stale. And then that's part of how I get stuck. And so I try to avoid that by just like, you know, listening to new stuff, watching new stuff, revisiting stuff that always inspires me, you know, like, and like going back to those comfort films, or like those comfort shows that always like kind of remind you of that spark, you know, that always helps. Sometimes stepping away and just like consuming things that you like helps, you know, because that's, I think, a lot of the baseline for creativity sometimes.
That's great. I love that answer, because it's like, it's kind of like rekindling, kindling that fire. I was trying to sound so smart, and then I couldn't say the words. Rekindling the fire.
God, that's so real.
We have questions from our listeners. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them, but I want to give a quick shout out to our patron Puzzle Glum, and to our YouTube listener Ad Ross 2868. And because a lot of the questions that we're getting, I think, are kind of like around the same theme. So on Instagram, weird_o also asks, what are your comedic influences, whether they be movies, shows, or other artists, etc.?
Yes. Okay. Wow. That's a great question. That's challenging as well, because comedy is so like amorphous, you know what I mean? It's like there's so much to it. I think a lot of my like day-to-day influence is just like people, like in general, like my friends, and just like observing people. Like I'm the type of person where I like going to just like, I like talking to strangers, and I like,
nice.
you know, like just like the weird things that people do and say, and like the weird, you know, idiosyncrasies of like the way people talk to each other. That's always funny to me. Like I find humor in like the most standard interactions, because it's just like the little things that we all do that we pretend that we don't, and like the little like things that we pretend about, and like just the little weird things that we as humans do, always like those things make me laugh, you know. And then like a lot of the stuff that I grew up with had a very certain like specific flavor of humor. Like I mentioned it, I mentioned Adventure Time earlier, and like that was a big one for me, because the humor was so off kilter. It was so rooted in, you know, both the fantastical, but then also like the fact that the characters had such regular reactions to these things. And that was the thing. It was like the characters felt real, even though their world was so fantastical, because they would just react to things in such a human way. And that's just, I think that's one of the best things about comedy, is that it's rooted in just like observation, like seeing something that's just like, this is just a weird thing that people do, and then recreating that, and you know, and just seeing how ridiculous a situation you can create while maintaining that realism of how people would react to it. So like goofy cartoons, anime, especially like over the top, like super bizarre anime. Like if you look at something like Nishijou, that always inspires me, because it's like it's taking a very normal situation and then blowing it completely out of proportion. Like stuff like that always makes me laugh. Regular Show, same thing, where it's like it starts off with such a simple premise, and then through that premise you just take it to an extreme, you know what I mean? And then you just keep riffing on it until it's almost unrecognizable from the start. You know, that stuff always kills me. And so just like stuff that does that, like that always inspires me because it's like you can take something really simple and then make it wild and crazy. Like my most recent comic is very similar. It's that like we're talking about like generational bias and like having rose tinted glasses when you look at the past and stuff like that. Very simple conversation. And then the gag at the end is that like I tell him that I can't take my rose tinted glasses off, and he asks why, and I pull like a nose hair, and it like activates like rose tinted like lenses in my eyes, and I tell him I had my rose tinted glasses surgically implanted. You know
the transition lenses.
Right, exactly. It's like it's stupid. It like it doesn't really like it's a non sequitur in a way, but it also like feeds into the overall theme. But it's like you're just taking the general basic concept and then like, all right, how can I make this absolutely ridiculous? Or how can I just make this weirder than it needs to be? And that's always like a fun process, is just like taking something really basic and then just like playing into it and like seeing, okay, how can I take this to its natural conclusion in a really goofy way? That always inspires me. And then also just like, yeah, like what's it called? Just absurdist humor. I love absurdist humor. Something like Airplane was one of the early like first comedies I watched where I was just like, they're really just making shit up. Like they're like they don't care if it fits in the plot. They don't care if it makes any sense. They just thought it was funny and they threw it in there. And so like I'll do like references to like Airplane sometimes, just like funny lines that like have stuck with me. Like I still think that like the whole like don't call me Shirley joke, it's one of the dumbest jokes that has ever made me cackle. And anytime somebody references that, it kills me. And I put it I feel like I put it in so many comics where it's like just the whole like Shirley, you can't be serious is like I am serious, don't call me Shirley. It's like it's such a basic joke, but it's like those grown worthy jokes always really work on me, you know, like just like wordplay jokes, portmanteaus. I think that's the word for it, where it's like someone will say two words and then I just instinctively will just mash them together into a new word. Love that shit. I love like wordplay and stuff like that. Like those always, I love that. Like language jokes. There's an episode of Vibe Check where the punchline of the joke is literally just an extended alliteration. It's like the entire episode leading up to it, like it's like they're in the middle of like they're starting a fight with somebody, and like all of the dialogue leading up to like the last like dialogue monologue or whatever is all in service of like building this alliteration that's just like an extended like basically every word is just a word that starts with C. And so all of that was just like, I was like, that would be really funny if the end of it is just like a long-winded like alliteration joke. And it's like, I don't know if anyone else finds that as funny as I do, like when I was writing it, but I was like, I was chuckling. So I was like, you know what? I'm keeping that in. You know, the whole thing is just like nothing really happens in the episode besides like a setup for just like a ridiculous word joke. And I think that stuff like that, where you just go over the top to commit to like a simple, ridiculous bit, is my favorite kind of stuff. So like I try to do that as much as I can, is like taking something that I think is funny and running with it until it's only funny to me. You know?
I love that. That's so true. I think, I don't know, I feel like if you're laughing at your joke, somebody else has to laugh too, right? I don't know, like it has to make at least yourself laugh, because if you don't even laugh at your own joke, then you know who's gonna find it funny, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like the be yourself thing. Everyone says be yourself, but we don't really like unpack what that means. And I think what it means in comedy is that like if you think it's funny and nobody else thinks it's funny, it's still going to be funnier to you than if you make something that's just going to make other people laugh and you don't find it funny. And that's a big pitfall of like relatable humor, is that like a lot of people are afraid that their jokes are going to be like, they're not going to be relatable. But the thing is, if you just make it authentically what you find funny, the right people will find it funny. People who like get your sense of humor, they're going to gravitate towards you. Whereas if you're making stuff that's just supposed to be like broadly appealing, yeah, a bunch of like a lot more people are going to be able to like, you know, blow air out of their nose, right? But if you make something that's very specific, like very, very niche, then the people who get it are going to laugh twice as hard, you know, as compared to like if it's just like a general relatable funny sentiment. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
like earlier when Sean, when you were talking about like the way that, you know, Pendleton Ward would draw like hands with guns,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, stuff like that. That's not a like a mass appeal kind of visual gag.
No,
Like
it's
that's
not.
not like a thing where everybody's going to be like, oh, that's a really relatably funny thing.
It's a
But to the
taste thing
people
for
where
sure. Yeah.
it's a taste thing, and so the people with that taste, they're going to be rolling. You know what I mean? You can get like a moderate laugh from a lot of people, or you can get like you know, tears streaming, you know, rolling on the ground laugh from a select few people. And that second one is a lot more rewarding to me, I think. You know, like being weird and authentic to like what you find funny,
Yeah.
and then finding the little group of people who find that insanely funny. That's the best. Like that's the sweet spot, I think.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I can try to write clever jokes all I want, but I think the ones that always make people laugh the most are sort of those like the ones that just start in your gut and make you belly laugh. And usually it's a reaction to like just somebody yelling or like or like or somebody holding something in a stupid way. Like it's usually not the sophisticated stuff, at least for me, that makes me like actually laugh out loud. Usually and so like for me, I try to customize my writing process around that. I'm like, I'm going to try to write the stuff that makes me laugh the most. It's not going to be wordplay that makes me laugh necessarily. It's going to be how stupid the situation is, or how it's escalating and everyone's stressed out, or it's compounding and like, you know, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, like that's why pee pee poo poo humor has its place. You know what I mean? Like just you know what I mean? Like see, like even just saying the word pee pee poo poo humor is like it's funny. It's like it's not sophisticated, it's not comedy writing. It's just like there is something that's just hilarious about base level brain rot. That's just it's hard to describe. The idea that like there's a there's like a joke that I find hilarious where it's like somebody, it's just like this woman is like, I need advice from my ancestors. It's like I'm going through a difficult time. It's like, tell me, ancestors, what must I do? And it's just like it just cuts to like a caveman's face, just and it just says ooga booga. And I'm like, that's so funny. Like it's not even clever per se. It's just like a caveman saying ooga booga is like, I'm just like, yeah, so true. Like that's so real. You know what I mean? Like the reject humanity, return to monkey kind of thing, where it's like, you know, it doesn't need to be high thought. It just needs to be kind of funny. It just needs to be like, this is stupid enough to make me laugh. And I don't really need a good reason why it's funny, but it works. Like the things that I send to like my brother, for example, like we have a very specific sense of humor where I know that only he will find this funny. And I'll send it to him, and it'll just be like the most like rapid cut, like brain melting, just like a cacophony of sound effects and images that's just nonsensical. And I couldn't explain why it's funny, but I know that it'll make him laugh. And it's like, that's enough. Like, just you don't need to be able to like craft the perfect joke, but there is like a very visceral sense of like, this will make people laugh. And I don't know why, but it works, and like those have their place as well as like the really well planned out, you know, comedically sound jokes, you know.
Honestly, that's so real. I have in my, so I have a short that's coming up, an animated short, and I was trying to put as many jokes as I could in it, and there's a moment I was like, oh well, this character has to like kind of like slip and fall and accidentally hit the other character, because I think like characters accidentally hitting each other is really funny. And I was like, how can they just like fall? And I was just like, you know what, they're gonna slip up on the banana peel, and it still makes me laugh just because it's just so dumb. And it's like sometimes, like you said, you don't have to come up with something that's crazy like high brow. You could just be like, yeah, they need to slip, here's a banana peel. A Ucheomaaa joke is still funny. It's still funny.
Literally, like it's like the whole ligma thing, you know what I mean? It's like it's like there's one of my favorite, like, it's a really funny just like image. Someone took like just screenshots from Watchmen, right? It's like it's like, I mean, spoilers for Watchmen, I guess, but there's a scene where like Rorschach's talking to Dr. Manhattan, and they just took those screen caps, and it's just like he's just like, it's so sad that Steve Jobs died of ligma. And then Rorschach is like, who's Steve Jobs? And then Dr. Manhattan just says ligma balls and just vaporizes him. And that's like it's so funny in that it's like you're setting someone up for a joke. The joke doesn't land
in a cartoon that you control. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. It's like you could write the joke perfectly, but it's like, what if you like the joke flops and it's in your control, and then the person still tries to complete the joke anyway. It's like that stuff is hilarious to me, where it's like someone trying to be funny and failing can be just as funny as someone succeeding in a joke. And I think, like, I don't know, even someone like Norm Macdonald, like as a comedian, that was one of the things that like made him a great, in my opinion, is that he would make a joke, and sometimes the joke was that the joke wasn't funny and he didn't care. And in fact, he didn't even seem to notice. Like when a joke landed and when a joke didn't land, he had the exact same reaction, which was like vague confusion, where it's like he's almost confused as to why anybody would laugh at that, because he plays it completely straight. He's like, I wasn't even really joking. I wasn't really trying to joke. I was just saying stuff. But it clearly was a joke, and the joke is that the joke wasn't funny.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and that's such a great, like, it's a great abstraction of humor, like as a concept, where it's like it doesn't really have to make sense. But it's like if the confusion makes people laugh, then it's a joke that works. You know, like it's so great. Like yeah, just like the weird contradictions of humor are also funny, you know.
That's so funny. No, yeah, man. It's so fun to hear you like talk about what you like in comedy, and I'm sure like all of the people who ask questions are going to be so excited to hear you talk about it, because you have such a specific take on it. I wish we could get to Cartoon Randy, G2, Sun Whiskers, Ink KG, Sun Bows W questions, but we are kind of fortunately getting to the end of this very fun episode, everybody. So I guess my last question for you, which is, do you have anything you want to plug?
Oh man. Oh, let's see. Wow. I think here's what I think I'll plug Vibe Check, just because. Just
Yes.
because I've mentioned it a lot. It's near and dear to my heart. If you like comedy, it's a nice light read for most of it. And season 2 is coming out soon. Currently working on that. So keep your eyes peeled if you're a fan of season 1, you know, because I have had people ask me about that. So yeah, Vibe Check season 2 is happening, and it is in progress and will be coming out shortly. But yeah, Webtoon Originals, Vibe check it out for sure. Presha by Lil Wayne and 2
Yes.
Chainz. Check out the video for that, because that was really fun to work on. And yeah, more cartoons on the way. Super cool. Super cool.
Hell yeah.
More cartoons on the way. Well, that's the end of this
Yeah.
creative block. Uche, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun.
And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on social media at CRTV Block, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor Clemens for editing the podcast, Marco for helping us produce the show, and Abuka for creating the short clips we've been putting out.
If you love our show, you can support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gives you early access to interviews and access to our Discord community. But you can also support us by interacting with our content. You can subscribe, like, comment, all of these
Smash that
things.
bell. Ring that
Yes.
bell like Notre Dame from the ring tops. Hit that notification bell. It's a doorbell now. We've upgraded.
Interacting with our content helps us get it in front of more eyeballs, and more eyeballs means that we get more support from all the different social media.
Eyeballs.
Give us your eyeballs. Yes, click the links in the description of this episode to follow Uche on all social media and to read Vibe Check. And I have been your host VEE.
And I have been Eyeball Merchant. Please keep being creative, and we'll see you next week, but you won't see us because I'm collecting your eyeballs. Peace out.
Bye.